welcome to Get Fruitful Conversations. I'm your host, Anwyn Cooper, and if you're interested in growing a passion-fueled, purpose-driven enterprise and believe that business can be a force for greater good, then this is the podcast for you. Each episode, I'll be talking with inspiring entrepreneurs and inviting them to share how they're pioneering new ways of working to create more prosperity and positive impact for people and the planet. We'll be bringing you fresh insight and practical actions to generate more income and impact through your own business. Our purpose is to give you new perspectives on how to align your vision to a bigger mission in a way that fulfills your personal potential while also generating a longer lasting legacy and more value for all. So thanks for tuning in. I'm delighted you're here to listen. Now let's get fruitful with today's conversation. So today I am talking to Martin White. Martin has a background working in large advertising agencies in London, where he was the lead suit on the Eurotunnel Le Shuttle launch in the mid-90s, before moving on to Unilever to head up the relationship marketing teams at Lever Faberge, and ultimately across the 3 UK operating companies. Martin White is on a mission to connect businesses with potential customers, and he is now the founder of supplyMyBusiness.co.uk, which is the B2B media and marketing platform that promotes and connects businesses in Kent, London, Essex and Sussex to do business. And he has recently started a new business called Green Business Hub, from a desire to create more sustainable business growth for the benefit of all of us. And crucially, Green Business Hub brings consumers and businesses who have a shared green or sustainable environmental objective, either as buyer or supplier, and brings them together in one place to do business. And he's also the host of a live FM business radio show, kentbizconnect.co.uk, showcasing the best of the business talent in Kent, London, Essex and Sussex and beyond on a bi-weekly basis. So I'm really delighted to be live in conversation with Martin White today. And we're going to be talking all about his new Green Business Hub venture and his entrepreneurial journey and how businesses can be a greater force for good in the world. So welcome, Martin.
Anwyn, thank you so much for the welcome. And you took me back a few years there, crikey, in the mid-90s.
Does that seem a long time ago?
Certainly does.
So yeah, you've had a really interesting, varied career to this point. Is there anything you want to add? Is there anything I missed out from that introduction?
Well, I mean,
you want to draw out in particular? What have been the highlights?
Well, I guess
lowlights.
I guess the constant theme has been sort of marketing. That's been the sort of the common thread. But working in an agency was very different, obviously, to working client side for Unilever. So that was an interesting change in dynamic. But yeah, it's I've been very fortunate. I mean, I've worked on some incredible brands. You mentioned the Eurotunnel launch in the mid-90s. I mean, that was just fantastic. That was a whirlwind of activity for us. I mean, they were just throwing money at that like you wouldn't believe, just to get the thing off the ground and have a constant presence in the media week on week. And so we were rolling out all of their direct response press advertising, for example, across all the national newspapers. We launched a loyalty program for them. We were doing customer service monitoring programs. We were promoting all of their sort of day trip, short break, long stay tickets as well. So that really quite early on in my career was a fantastic sort of grounding in business, if you like.
Such an amazing opportunity. It's a real sort of once in a lifetime launch, that one, isn't it?
Yeah, it really was. I mean, obviously the business has changed fundamentally now, but I guess the key outtake from everything that I've done is that business is such a great learning environment for how the world works. It teaches you all about financial acumen, how to build relationships, politics, society, your place within society, really. And I think certainly for me, it has given me a sense of purpose, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
So tell us about what you're doing now with
Mm.
your current latest venture. And
Yeah.
why did you decide to start that? Because you started it last year as well, didn't you? So it's quite a
Yes.
recent thing.
Yeah.
Was it inspired by the pandemic, or was it something you've been wanting to do for a while?
It was pre-pandemic. It just happened to coincide, launch-wise with the pandemic when we were in full swing. But I think it's fair to say that before COVID, all the talk was around climate change,
Mm,
and I think all the talk is coming back to climate change again now as well. And I think on a personal level, it's something that I was very conscious of in terms of the need for me and my household, if you like, to do something about making a positive contribution to tackling climate change. So on a personal level, it was something I had a vested interest in. And then I started talking to other people in business, and I was on holiday in the south of France a couple of years ago for Christmas, and we stayed with some friends. And that particular friend is a super yacht designer down in the south of France, and he was
wow,
saying,
you've got
"Yeah,
good friends.
yes, I'm very fortunate." And he was saying that one of his biggest frustrations as a boat designer is not being able to put his hands on the latest green technology
Mm,
that he can build into his boats. Whether
hmm
that's energy, propulsion related, whatever it might be. That there was no single place that he felt able to go to get the latest information on, the latest thing, if you like, that he should be looking at in order to make his business and his industry more sustainable. And that
hmm
really got me thinking about, well, actually, we're all in that same boat, whether we're businesses or consumers. The green marketplace is actually very fragmented at the moment.
Yeah, where do you
Uh,
go
if,
for that information?
yeah, yeah. If you want to actively go green, how do you do that? Well, it just ultimately it means spending an awful lot of time on the internet, doing an awful lot of research to,
Yeah.
end up with possibly a manufacturer of something on the other side of the world that actually isn't able to supply you with what you want anyway.
Mm,
Um, but nevertheless, when you scratch beneath the surface, you do realize that there are an awful lot of fantastic businesses out there already in that space. And what we're trying to do really with Green Business Hub is just kind of bring them all together in one place, so that people kind of, actually know where to go, when they're looking for something.
and just make it easier. So do you want
Yeah.
it to be a place for other businesses to connect with each other, or is it for consumers or both?
I'd like it to be both. I mean, in the short term, we're very focused on the business community, the business to business community, if you like, and in particular the kind of the whole built environment, the construction sector, renewable energy, all of that kind of stuff. And I think that's important because that is obviously going to be a key driver towards us becoming a net zero economy by 2050.
Mm,
Housing in particular, the spotlight is really on housing developments moving forwards in terms of making them as energy efficient as possible. and
mm,
and obviously that industry hasn't been affected by lockdown. In fact, it's been the reverse.
yeah.
The construction industry has really been cracking on, while the rest of the economy has been sort of trying to work its way around the limitations of the pandemic. So that's a really exciting space to be in. It's a very dynamic space, and we're working with businesses in that space already who recognize that they need to do more. And in fact, the industry itself, it's fair to say, is now lobbying government for tighter building controls and regulations because the
Oh,
government
right.
simply aren't doing it themselves.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and there's some fantastic businesses out there, businesses providing, the raw materials to be used in construction, as well as, main contractors and businesses like that who are actually saying, look, First and foremost, we want to try and work with a more local supply chain. We want to support local suppliers wherever possible. But also we want to give our clients the option. We recognize that we've got to give our clients the option of being able to build greener than, the traditional method, if you like. And, Kent County Council, for example, have a huge schools building budget and program annually. I think they're spending sort of in excess of £250 million just in Kent,
Wow.
on building new schools, refurbishing existing schools. And again, all of that tendering process is now much more focused on, what you can deliver from a sustainability perspective.
It's just
So
becoming
it's
more
happening.
important. Yeah, no, that's great to hear. So what's your ultimate vision, would you say? What are you working towards with Green Business Hub? Where would you like to see it get to eventually?
I mean, really, for me, it's about helping drive the sustainability in business agenda. And I think within that, connecting as many businesses as possible to help them benefit commercially from becoming more sustainable in their own right. And that might be either through sort of the products and services that they produce and market, or by adopting, more sustainable solutions in their own business operations. So, that's kind of what we're there to do, really. That's it really is about, raising awareness, raising the agenda, but also ultimately, and I think this is key for me, there's nothing wrong with, with making money in business. We just need to do it in a, we just need to do it in a more sustainable way.
Yeah,
exactly. And the world turns on money, and to be honest with you, I don't see that changing. But what we have got to be aware of is that, we just have to do that in a much more sustainable way. And, critically, we need to understand, our relationship, for example, with the natural world, because everything we are, everything we have, everything we do is derived from, what we've been able to take out of, nature. In terms of natural resources, it's the earth, it's water, it's the air we breathe. Ultimately everything, every car we drive, everything we eat, everything comes from the planet. Everything we do on that level is facilitated by our ability to to mine natural resources, for example, on the planet.
Yeah, so
and
true.
I think, the reality is we're consuming way more on that level than the planet can ever provide. We're already, I think it's about 1.6 Earths, if you like, in terms of our annual consumption of natural resources.
Yes.
And so we need to kind of balance climate change with our kind of consumption of natural resources. And I mean, there's so much great information out there. I mean, Ellen Macarthur, she set up a foundation, I think in 2015, I think it was, called the Ellen Macarthur Foundation. First, female yachtswoman to sail solo around the globe, and her consultancy business is all about the circular economy.
Yeah.
And she makes the point that, the system we've been kind of, the economic system we've been following up until now has been one of sort of take, make, and then discard. And what we actually need to do is think about how we can design out waste and pollution, keep products and materials in use for far longer, and ultimately also regenerate, our natural systems. Intensive farming, for example, what does that actually do in terms of soil degradation over time and, productivity of soil? Well, obviously it's extremely damaging using, non-organic pesticides and things like that. So, we all need to just have be much more fixed in terms of our awareness, I think, of these issues and what we can collectively do about it.
Yeah, bring things back into balance, as you say. So how how are you building the business at the moment? What are you doing to get the message out there? Obviously, you're here today talking with me,
Yes.
but you know, you're kind of already established with another business, aren't you? With Supply My Business. So is that helping you with this new venture, or are you keeping them quite separate and doing things quite differently this time?
They are separate, but nevertheless, having established a business already in the marketplace, it means that obviously I have a network of people like yourself who I already know, for example. And so, it is quite often a case of reaching out to that network and, and saying, okay, this is what we're also doing now. And then using that on a kind of on a referral level to make new contacts and introductions through that existing network. So that is incredibly important. I think anybody starting out in business, I would think about before you do that, what does my network, my business network look like? Because obviously, the stronger that is, the more you're going to be able to hit the ground running, I think.
Yeah.
So, that's certainly important. I'm very fortunate in Kent. I mean, we are a national business as opposed to Supply My Businesses, which is much more kind of Kent focused. But I am fortunate in that, Kent County Council have come on board fairly early doors with us to promote all of the green business initiatives that they're running as well. So, green grant funding, for example, programs like Low Case. I'm driving one of their electric vans around at the moment, actually, which I'm loving. They've got an electric van trial running at the moment, so you can try an electric van free for 2 months, which is fantastic. And yeah, so it's about getting all of that out into the marketplace. And I think one of the biggest problems we have is that certainly when initiatives, great initiatives like that are being driven by the public sector, is that people just aren't aware of them because there's never any budget to promote them.
Yeah.
And
it's all a bit secret and hidden away.
Well, it's not that so much. It's just that the public purse is so much more accountable, in terms of how taxpayer money is ultimately spent. So it's not that they want to keep it a secret. It's just that they're not actually able to to promote it. But obviously, in our case, they've obviously made an exception. So yeah, it's about it is about network. It is about being able to work with some great clients early on, because I think ultimately a platform like ours is only ever going to be as good as the content that's on it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so you need to have good people.
Yeah, but I mean, we absolutely, and we've just started working with a local construction company, a main contractor and developer called Red Key Concepts. They were based just outside Whitstable. And again, they've been a breath of fresh air as well, because of their desire, if you like, to kind of to push the sustainability envelope. And through that, we've now got a radio show in a couple of weeks' time where we've got a sustainable timber frame company called Paramount coming onto the show, and also a lady that is kind of spearheading the drive towards encouraging younger people into the construction industry. And sustainability isn't all necessarily about climate change and natural resources. It's about obviously eliminating poverty. It's about
sustainability on all fronts, really.
It's about education. It's I mean, if you look at the UN sustainability goals, there's 17 of them, and it covers a huge range. I mean, they're all ultimately related to each other, but it's not all about climate change or natural resources. There's an awful lot more involved.
Yeah, it's how do we sustain our lives and our livelihood, isn't it? It's how do we sustain our food chain and, like you say, education system and finance as well.
Food poverty.
It is all encompassing.
Yeah. So, and therefore, obviously, sustainability, you know, will mean different things to different people.
Yeah.
You know, there isn't one, you know, one answer or one issue. You know, as I say, it will mean different things to different people. But nevertheless, you know, as an umbrella, it's obviously a very important subject.
Yeah. Well, it's fundamental, really, to our existence.
Well, it is,
At the end of
and
the
our way
day.
of the, you know, the way we live our lives, you know,
Mm,
today. You know, if we don't, if we don't fix that kind of relationship, for example, that we have with the natural world, you know, the human prosperity that we enjoy today, you know, our well-being, our future, you know, all of that is there's a big question mark over it, frankly.
absolutely. So, what is keeping you busy at the moment? What are you sort of working towards in terms of growing Green Business Hub? Kind of what are the next steps for
Yeah.
you?
Well, I mean, we spoke about, you know, networking off air before we went live. And, you know, for me, it is about, first and foremost, it's about connecting with existing businesses in that space, and finding the best way to do that. And, you know, going to, you know, an open forum networking group, for example, isn't necessarily the best way for me to do that, because I'm not necessarily going to meet you know, the businesses that I want to in those kind of forums. So for me, it's about connecting directly with businesses that I see operating successfully and proactively in that space, having a dialogue with them, you know, creating some engagement and relationship, and then having a conversation about, you know, whether or not a platform like ours is ultimately going to be relevant to them. So, you know, the focus is very much on those kind of quality rather than quantity of conversations for me at the moment.
Yeah. And yeah, like you say, finding the right people who share your values and,
Yeah.
you know, align with your vision, rather than, you know, putting across what you have to offer to everyone, so being more targeted in your approach. So what would you say has been your biggest learning through business? What's your kind of main takeaway? Maybe something about yourself, or about the world.
Well, I think, you know, as I said before, I think, you know, business in general is a great learning environment, you know, for how the world works. I think for me, you know, as I've become, you know, as I've sort of moved into my early middle age, shall we say, I think, you know, one of the, you start to kind of realize, you're much more aware of the environment around you, I think. And I think, you know, one of the things that I've come to realize is, you know, the utter pointlessness in simply making money for the sake of making money, for example. You know, and I mean, I don't want to name names, but, you know, there's the world's largest company out there at the moment, you know, sitting on $500 billion plus of cash in its bank account, you know, which is doing absolutely nothing. And, you know, you've got to kind of question the, you know, the purpose in that, you know, and I think, you know, how as a society, you know, as a certainly in the Western world, you know, the world's largest economies are ultimately being driven by shareholder greed and not stakeholder value, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think that is kind of an important kind of realization for me. You know, and as I say, going back to that kind of very linear approach that we have to kind of doing business, and you know, that kind of very linear economy of kind of take something, you know, from the earth, make something, and then stick it in landfill, you know. And I think that, you know, that for me just doesn't make any sense. So, you know, do I need to buy, you know, a brand new iPhone every Christmas that's going to cost me £1,000, or would I much prefer to buy a recycled iPhone, you know, maybe twice, you know, maybe every other year, that's going to cost me, you know, maybe a quarter of that, you know. And I think, you know, stuff like that for me is quite kind of fundamental. Yeah, and ultimately, for me, it's about understanding and focusing in on the environmental and social impact that our individual businesses and personal lives have. That for me is the key. And then, in a commercial context, the opportunity is to, channel that into a positive marketing strategy, with a business plan, because, ultimately sustainable businesses are going to be far more resilient in the longer term, and they're going to attract more investment, and they're going to attract more customers, and ultimately they will make more money. But it's not as simple as saying, we're a net zero carbon business, because actually what you physically produce and sell, isn't necessarily helping.
No.
If that makes sense. Or the way that
I was looking at the bigger
way
picture.
that you produce, the way that you produce and sell what you do isn't necessarily conducive to that, to sustainability.
Yeah, that's really profound. Thank you.
Well, I mean, I think, again, I'm not the world's expert on any of this, far from it. But what is great to see is the number of programs out there now that are being broadcast. And I've watched, I think, 3 or 4 recently. The first one was about some of the local authorities up and down the country that have invested in rubbish incinerators. Because there was this huge drive away from landfill, towards incineration as being preferable, and the kind of the complete the kind of the strategy behind that, which was fundamentally flawed, because what local authorities are now doing is diverting rubbish away from recycling in order to feed incineration plants.
Oh no.
Yeah, because they're not efficient unless they're running at whatever percent capacity, 7 days a week. So there's so that was a really interesting program. There was a great program about the water companies. I think it was last week. I think it was Panorama again, talking about the fact of the matter there is water either falls out of the sky into a reservoir, or it's already underground and it gets pumped up, and and then it goes through treatment and into our homes. What the water companies are doing in terms of pumping raw sewage into our rivers, into our ecosystems, because ultimately they've put profit before before the environment. That's the reality of that. I mean, where I live, just down the road, Joss Bay, we've got a beautiful beach there, and I think twice in the last 5 or 6 years, I think Southern Water have pumped raw sewage into the sea there. And in fact, I've just had a letter from them attached to my water bill. I've got it here somewhere, talking about how they were so sorry for doing that, and how they'd been fined by the regulator, 100 million quid, and we were all going to get some money back.
Oh goodness.
So there's some really great programs out there. Greta Thunberg, a lot of people just, she's a bit of a Marmite character.
Yeah.
People either love her or hate her. Yeah. But actually, you've got to kind of put the personality to one side and actually listen to what she's saying. And everything she says is based on research that's been done. It's she calls it the science.
Yeah, the evidence is there,
and it is all there. And actually, there was a great program on with her. I think it was this week, and there's a second part of that next week, and it followed her around the world on her lobbying journey for a year. And that again really kind of struck a chord with me. There was a brilliant report published for the UK government just back in February. It got no media attention whatsoever. It's called the Economics of Biodiversity.
Okay. Got lost in the ether of COVID news.
And it talks overtly about the fact that our economies, livelihoods, well-being, everything basically depends on, you know, our most precious asset, which is nature. And how we've really got to kind of fix that relationship that we have with nature, because it's very one-sided at the moment. It's all take and no give, if that makes sense.
Or not enough give back. Yeah. So you touched on the subject of Greta Thunberg there, and
Yes.
that was making me want to ask you my next question, which is about where do you draw inspiration from? You know, are there other people out there that you have listened to, or books that you've read? You've mentioned a couple of films that you've watched there, but yeah, any other sources of information or inspiration that have informed your business journey?
I just, you know, try and have an open mind about things, I think, you know, is what I would say there. And I'm quite naturally inquisitive, and you know, everything I'm doing at the moment, I do genuinely have a passion for, and that drives that inquisitiveness, if you like, to find out more information. And I will spend, you know, on an average week, I'll probably spend 2 or 3 hours, you know, just kind of just finding out information. And I think, you know, that the one thing we have today that was sorely lacking when I was, you know, in the educational system is the internet.
Yeah, we
in my
you can basically find any information you want whenever you want.
We're incredibly lucky. In my day, you know, when I was at school, I had to go and sit in a library somewhere and hope that they had, you know, a book on something that I was interested in. But I, you know, and I had to have to physically sit there and read it. You know, now I've got all of that information. Every question in the world that you could possibly have is at the end of your fingertips.
So cool.
It is amazing, isn't it? I mean, the power of that.
We don't really think about it that often. We've just become accepting that it's normal now, haven't we?
But I don't really. I'm not somebody that kind of, you know, idolizes role models, or you know, I'm not really.
You're not into your business gurus.
Not really.
No. Oh, very good. Well, in our last couple of minutes, I will ask you to share your contact details. If people want to find out more about Green Business Hub or get in touch with you, you can share that before we go. But before we do that, is there anything else you would like to say about what you're up to, or any final sort of words of wisdom that you'd like to leave for other people who are maybe starting out in business or are already on that path?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of starting out in business, do your research. It's very easy to start a business, you know, without having really given it any kind of proper thought. I mean, there's some fantastic business support organizations out there. I mean, I work quite closely with Let's Do Business Group, for example, and they're very, very focused on helping startups make the most of their startup business idea and opportunity. So, you know, before you go out and spend money, before you kind of just launch yourself into the marketplace, do your research, write your business plan, understand your purpose, you know, why are you doing it? And you know, and I think ultimately you'll have much more chance of making it a success.
Very true.
I'm really excited to see what comes up at the end of the year out of COP26. We've got a massive climate change conference happening in November in Glasgow.
Okay.
You know, 20
attending?
Well, virtually.
Yeah.
I'm sure I will be. Yeah. And again, you know, that's one of the key things that's come out of the lockdown, isn't it? The fact that we are all now familiar with doing business in a different way. I mean, I've probably saved myself 10,000 miles of carbon emissions in my car in the last year alone.
Yeah, fantastic.
You know, so yeah, keep an eye on that. That's at the beginning of November in Glasgow. I mean, we had the Paris Agreement in 2015. You know, we've all signed up to, you know, net zero carbon by 2050 in order to limit global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees. The reality of that is we're way off that. We're way behind that. I think we'd have to basically do away with all domestic gas boilers in the next 5 years in order to get back on track.
Wow.
So we're that's how far behind we are that target. So it's going to be really interesting to see how world governments and the United Nations ultimately get us back on track.
Yeah.
Because I think there's a movement now that started amongst people like you and I, Anwin, and other members of the public, who ultimately are looking for accountability here.
Definitely. I think it's happening on all levels. We are seeing obviously bigger businesses doing some things to lead the way, but definitely there's a rising movement, I would say, amongst consumers and small businesses as well, which is heartening.
Yeah.
So thank you, Martin. Before we go, please tell people, how can they get in touch with you and find out more about what you're up to?
Well, we really are sort of a digital platform business. So we've got greenbusinesshub.eco is our website.
Mm-hmm.
We've got kentbizconnect.co.uk is our radio show.
Okay.
And we've got supplyMyBusiness.co.uk as our broader business-to-business platform.
Great. We will encourage everyone to go and check that out.
Brilliant.
And go and tell your friends. Thanks again, Martin, for joining me. It's been really great to talk with you today. Thanks for listening in to today's Get Fruitful conversation. If you've enjoyed what you've heard, I invite you to give us a 5-star rating, leave a review, subscribe to the podcast, and tell your friends and colleagues to check it out too. This will help us reach a wider audience and make sure you don't miss out on future episodes. If you'd like to get in touch, connect with other like-minded people in business, and continue conversations about topics discussed here, then I'd love you to come and find our community online. It's free to join us. Just search for the Get Fruitful Business for Good group over on Facebook, visit my website, getfruitfulmarketing.com, or click the links in the show notes. I'd love to hear what Business for Good means for you. Until next time, goodbye for now.